January 14, 1945. Northern Luzon, Philippines. The jungle breathes in wet whispers. Vines hang like theater curtains across trails unmarked on any map. Morning mist clings to the canopy, thick as smoke. And somewhere in the distance, a kingfisher calls, sharp, insistent, oblivious to war. 3 Japanese scouts move through the undergrowth with the practiced silence of men who have survived 3 years in these islands. Their boots, worn thin at the soles, make no sound on the carpet of rotting leaves. They are ghosts passing through a green hell, eyes scanning, ears tuned to frequencies beyond birdsong. Lieutenant Hayashi Kenji leads. His uniform, once pristine Imperial Army khaki, hangs loose on a frame that has shed 20 pounds since Bataan. Behind him, Corporal Tanaka and Private Yoshida maintain interval, 5 meters, no more, no less, exactly as the manual prescribes. They have been patrolling for 6 days, living on rice balls that turn to paste in the humidity, mapping American positions for the division command that waits 30 kilometers east. The radio operator who accompanied them died 2 days ago. Fever or infection, it hardly mattered which. They buried him shallow and moved on. Hayashi raises his fist. The column stops. He has seen something, or perhaps sensed it. That animal awareness that replaces thought in men who have lived too long at the edge. The forest ahead opens into a small clearing, perhaps 20 meters across, where light falls in columns through breaks in the canopy. It is empty. Completely, impossibly empty. No fortifications, no wire, no foxholes. The trail they have been following continues through it, worn smooth by what must be regular traffic. And yet there is nothing, no resistance. He signals forward. They enter the clearing in textbook formation, weapons ready, eyes sweeping the tree line. Still nothing. Hayashi kneels, examines the trail. Fresh marks, boot prints American pattern. At least a platoon, maybe more, no older than 12 hours. But where? The clearing behind them, the forest ahead. The trail continuing north toward what intelligence has marked as a supply depot. He pulls out his notebook, damp pages curling at the edges, and writes in quick characters. Route 7B clear. No enemy presence. Proceeding north. It is the last entry anyone will ever read. They do not know, cannot know, that they are already inside the killing jar, that the clearing is not empty, but watched through 17 different sets of eyes, that the forest floor, which seems so innocent, has been surveyed, ranged, and registered by men who have turned this jungle into something between a fortress and a trap. The Americans and Filipinos hidden in the undergrowth do not move. They barely breathe. They have learned patience in a war that has taught them everything except mercy. This is not 1942. The Japanese scouts carry maps drawn from those triumphant days when the empire swept south like a typhoon, when resistance crumbled and whole armies surrendered. Hayashi still remembers Singapore, though he was not there. Everyone remembers Singapore. The fortress that could not fall, fallen in a week. The white men, marching into captivity, thousands of them, faces blank with shock. The tide of history flowing in one direction, inevitable as gravity. That is what he was taught. That is what every man in the Imperial Army believed when they boarded transports in Osaka or Hiroshima or Nagasaki, when they waved to mothers and sisters and sailed toward a destiny the propagandists had already written. The reality they found in these islands has been something else entirely. 3 years of attrition, 3 years of watching the tide reverse. The American supply ships that were supposed to stop coming kept arriving. The enemy that was supposed to collapse kept fighting. And now, in early 1945, as the Emperor's armies contract toward the home islands like a wounded animal curling inward, Men like Hayashi are still walking into jungles and writing reports no one will read, because the headquarters they are addressed to no longer exists. But old training dies hard. Old beliefs die harder. So they proceed north, following the trail, because the mission is the mission, and there is nothing else. The forest swallows them in 3 steps. The canopy thickens. The light becomes submarine, green, and uncertain. Hayashi's hand rests on his rifle sling, that unconscious gesture soldiers make when things feel wrong. The trail narrows. Bamboo crowds close on both sides, and somewhere in his lizard brain a voice is screaming to stop, to turn back, to run. But he does not run. He is a lieutenant of the Imperial Army, and he has his duty. Corporal Tanaka, bringing up the rear, never sees the wire. It is fishing line, American manufacture, strung 6 inches off the ground and invisible in the shadows. His boot catches it, and something in the trees clicks. The sound is tiny, mechanical, almost polite. Then the forest explodes. The Filipinos have been preparing this stretch of trail for 2 weeks. They are guerrillas of the 66th Infantry Regiment, men who know these mountains the way sailors know stars. They have fought the Japanese since 1942, first alone, then with trickles of American support, and now in 1945 as part of a coordinated campaign to retake Luzon. They do not wear full uniforms. They do not have enough rifles. What they have is intimate knowledge of every ridge, every creek, every approach, and a fury that has been 3 years in the making. The grenades are American. The wire is American. The tactics are their own. The bamboo charges blow simultaneously, sending shrapnel and splinters screaming through the kill zone at waist height. Tanaka goes down without a sound, body folded around wounds he will never have time to comprehend. Yoshida manages to bring his rifle up before a second volley catches him high in the chest. He staggers, drops, and the jungle takes him like the earth swallowing a stone. Hayashi runs. Pure instinct overrides training. He crashes through bamboo, branches lashing his face, blood streaming from a dozen small cuts. Behind him, voices shout in Tagalog and English, a strange hybrid language of command and excitement. Rifle shots crack through the canopy. Bullets whip past, too close, tearing leaves and bark. He slides down a slope, scrambles up, keeps running. His map case is gone. His rifle is gone. He has only the animal imperative to survive. He makes it perhaps 300 meters before the forest opens again. Another clearing, larger this time, and his officer's training finally reasserts itself enough to make him stop at the tree line. He presses against a mahogany trunk, lungs burning, heart trying to break through his ribs. Slowly, carefully, he looks out. The clearing is full of Americans. It is not a company. It is not even a platoon. It is a logistics depot, sprawling and casual, the kind of installation that appears when an army has such profound confidence in its supply lines that it does not bother with concealment. Trucks are parked in neat rows, canvas-covered, engines still ticking as they cool. Tents form a small city, hospital tents, command tents, mess tents marked with smoke rising from field kitchens. Men move between them without helmets, without weapons, shirts unbuttoned in the heat, carrying crates and jerry cans and coils of wire. There is a generator humming somewhere, powering lights that burn even in daylight. There is music, tinny and distant, coming from a radio. Hayashi stares. His mind, trained to process tactical information, struggles with what he is seeing. This is not a front-line position. This is not even a fortified position. This is a rear area depot, the kind of installation that should be 50 kilometers from any fighting. And yet it sits here, in jungle he was told was contested, in territory his maps mark as disputed. The Americans have not conquered this forest. They have moved into it, the way a man moves into his home. Casually, comfortably, without fear. He watches a soldier emerge from a mess tent carrying a tray. Even at this distance, Hayashi can see what is on it: meat, vegetables, bread, fruit. The soldier sits on an ammunition crate and eats, slowly, without hurry. And when he is finished, he lights a cigarette and leans back, face tilted toward the canopy as if sunbathing. Another soldier walks past with a stack of letters, mail from home. Impossibly thick bundles that represent a logistics chain so secure, so comprehensive, that it can afford to carry personal correspondence across 10,000 miles of ocean. Hayashi has not received a letter in 8 months. The last rice distribution was 3 days ago, and it was half rations. The division is supposed to be living off the land, which is a euphemism for slow starvation. Men are eating roots, bark, anything that can be boiled into something that might provide calories. Diseases the medical officers cannot even identify are sweeping through the camps. And here, 300 meters from where his corporals lie dead, American soldiers are eating steak. The radio music changes. It is swing, brassy and confident, the kind of music that belongs in cities with electricity and dance halls and futures. Hayashi sinks slowly to his knees, back against the tree, and something in his chest, not his body but some structure in his understanding of the world, collapses. The Japanese soldier in 1945 had been taught many things. He had been taught that the white race was decadent, that democracy was weakness, that material comfort bred cowardice. He had been taught that the Japanese spirit, the Yamato Damashii, was stronger than steel, that willpower could overcome any obstacle, that a single Japanese soldier was worth 10 of the enemy. These were not merely propaganda. They were the foundation of a worldview, a lens through which every experience was interpreted. And that lens was shattering. Hayashi had seen the American planes, of course. Everyone had seen them. They filled the skies like locusts, so many that anti-aircraft fire became a gesture, a ritual observance of resistance rather than actual defense. He had watched supply drops fall on American positions, parachutes blooming white and red, containers crashing down full of food and ammunition and medicine, while his own unit waited for shipments that never came. He had found American equipment abandoned on battlefields, not because it was broken, but because something newer had replaced it. Because the logistics train was so vast that soldiers could afford to discard perfectly functional gear when it became inconvenient to carry. Hayashi thinks of his own officers. He thinks of Lieutenant Sato, who executed a private for losing a rifle. He thinks of Captain Okubo, who ordered his men to fix bayonets and charge American machine guns because to retreat would dishonor the emperor. He thinks of the division commander, whose last order was to continue attacking regardless of casualties, regardless of supply, regardless of any tactical consideration, except the abstract concept of honor. And he looks at this American lieutenant with his clipboard and his casual authority, and he understands that they are not fighting the same war. They have never been fighting the same war. The sun moves. Shadows lengthen. Hayashi knows he should retreat, report, carry the intelligence back to headquarters. But headquarters is 30 kilometers through jungle, now crawling with enemies who see at night and hear at distance and kill from ambush. And what would he report? That the Americans are here? Command already knows that. That they are strong? Command already knows that too. What Hayashi has discovered is not tactical information. It is ontological information. It is the knowledge that everything he was taught, everything he believed, was predicated on a fantasy. There is an object at his feet. He has been staring at it without seeing it for the past 20 minutes. It is a C-ration can, American military issue, labeled bright even in the jungle gloom. Someone has opened it, eaten the contents, and tossed it aside. Hayashi picks it up. The label shows a cheerful soldier eating what the English text identifies as meat and beans. The can is heavy, much heavier than Japanese rations. The tin is thick. The label is printed in 4 colors. Someone manufactured this can. Someone printed this label. Someone filled it with food, sealed it, packed it in a crate, loaded the crate on a truck, drove the truck to a port, loaded it on a ship, sailed the ship across the Pacific, unloaded it, trucked it again, distributed it to soldiers who ate it and threw it away, because there would always be more. The can becomes everything. It is a talisman, a symbol, a prophecy. Hayashi turns it in his hands, feeling the weight of it, and he understands with perfect, terrible clarity that Japan has already lost. Not because of battles or bombs or strategy, but because the nation that can afford to throw away a can like this, that can manufacture and transport and distribute abundance on this scale, cannot be defeated by willpower alone. Spiritual strength cannot bomb factories. Honor cannot sink cargo ships. Sacrifice cannot conjure supplies from empty air. The war is over. It simply has not stopped yet. Night falls. Hayashi does not move. The depot lights up. Actual electric lights strung on poles, powered by generators that hum steadily in the darkness. Soldiers move between the tents, shadows backlit by warm yellow light. Somewhere, someone is playing a guitar. The music is soft, melancholy, a song about going home. Hayashi sits in the darkness beyond the lights and listens. He thinks about surrender. It is not a new thought. Every Japanese soldier has thought about it by 1945, though few will admit it even to themselves. But surrender is not merely tactical defeat. It is spiritual annihilation. To be captured is to cease being Japanese, to become something else, something undefined and unnameable. The training is explicit: death before dishonor. Better to die than to live as a prisoner. Better to take as many enemies as possible into death than to survive alone. But sitting here, watching the Americans in their comfortable certainty, Hayashi finds himself wondering what dishonor actually means. Is it dishonorable to recognize reality? Is it dishonorable to admit that the war is lost? Is it more honorable to die in a jungle because ideology demands it, or to live and rebuild from the knowledge of defeat? He does not know. The questions are too large. They swallow the old certainties without providing new ones. He falls asleep there, back against the tree, the C-ration can still clutched in one hand. When he wakes, it is dawn, and the forest is full of voices. The guerrillas find him quickly. They have been tracking him since yesterday, watching him watch the depot, waiting to see what he would do. When they emerge from the undergrowth, rifles pointed, Hayashi does not resist. He raises his hands slowly, carefully, and stands. He is unarmed. He is alone. He is defeated in ways that have nothing to do with this specific moment. The Filipinos search him roughly, professionally. They find no weapons. They find no documents. They find only the can, still gripped tightly. And one of them laughs, a short, bitter sound, and says something in Tagalog that Hayashi does not understand. But he understands the tone. Contempt, yes, but also something like pity. They bind his hands and march him toward the depot. It takes 20 minutes. With every step, Hayashi expects execution. But they walk past the perimeter, past American sentries who barely glance up, past the tents and trucks and generators, to a smaller clearing where other prisoners sit under guard. There are perhaps 30 of them, Japanese soldiers in various states of decay, uniforms ragged, faces hollow. They look up as Hayashi arrives, and he sees his own recognition reflected in their eyes. They know. They all know. An American officer approaches. He is older, maybe 40, with sergeant stripes and the weathered face of a man who has been in these islands too long. He looks at Hayashi without anger, without triumph, just a kind of weary assessment. He says something in English. Hayashi does not speak English, but he understands the tone. It is not cruel. It is almost kind. The sergeant gestures and someone brings food. It is a C-ration, opened, the contents spooned onto a metal tray. Meat and beans, bread, fruit cocktail in heavy syrup. More food than Hayashi has seen in a week. He stares at it. His body, starved and desperate, wants to fall on it, to devour it. But some last fragment of pride holds him frozen. The sergeant watches, nods as if confirming something, and walks away. Hayashi eats slowly. The food is rich, almost too rich, and his stomach, shrunken and damaged, rebels. But he forces it down, bite by bite, and with every swallow, he feels the old certainties dying. He is a prisoner. He is alive. He is being fed by enemies who have so much abundance they can afford to be generous. It should feel like humiliation. Instead, it feels like waking from a nightmare. There are records of this, not of Hayashi specifically. He is a composite, drawn from dozens of similar accounts, but of the phenomenon itself. American intelligence officers in the Pacific Theater wrote extensively about captured Japanese soldiers and their psychological state. The reports, now declassified, describe men in shock not from battle trauma, but from cognitive dissonance. They describe soldiers who expected to find a weak, degenerate enemy, and instead encountered a military machine of such overwhelming competence that it invalidated every premise of their training. One report, dated February 1945, describes a captured lieutenant who spent 3 days in silence, before suddenly asking through an interpreter, "Where does all the food come from?" The question was not tactical. It was philosophical. He could not integrate what he was seeing with what he had been taught about America. That it was a nation of soft, materialistic individualists who would collapse under pressure. Instead, he found a nation that had turned its materialism into a weapon, that had industrialized warfare so completely that abundance itself became a form of violence. The Americans did not understand, at first, what they were looking at. To them, the logistics were simply practical. Of course you fed soldiers well. Of course you supplied them with everything they needed. Happy, healthy troops fought better. It was obvious. But to the Japanese, raised in a culture that valorized suffering, that equated hardship with virtue, American abundance looked like decadence, right up until the moment they realized it was power. And by then, for most, it was too late. Hayashi spends 3 weeks in the POW camp that grows around the depot. It is not a camp in the traditional sense. It is a clearing with tents and wire and guards. But the atmosphere is strange. The American soldiers do not abuse the prisoners. They do not torture or starve or humiliate. They simply process them, take names, photograph faces, Assign numbers. The prisoners are fed regularly. They are given medical care. A dentist visits and offers to fix teeth. A doctor treats tropical ulcers and jungle rot, and the dozen unnamed fevers that have become endemic. It is the kindness that breaks them. Many of the prisoners, perhaps most, were prepared for brutality. Brutality they could understand. Brutality would confirm what they had been taught about the enemy. But this casual, bureaucratic decency, this assumption that even enemies deserve food and medicine, is incomprehensible. It suggests a worldview so alien that it might as well be extraterrestrial. Hayashi talks to the other prisoners. They trade stories in low voices, after dark, when the guards are not listening. One man was captured near Manila. He describes American tanks rolling into the city, not slowly and cautiously, but almost casually, the way you would drive a truck down a familiar road. Another was captured on Leyte. He describes supply ships unloading at the beach, a continuous stream of cargo for 3 days, so much material that it piled up on the sand faster than it could be distributed. A third was a pilot, shot down, who describes the American carrier fleet with something like religious awe. Dozens of ships, more planes than he could count, moving in formations so tight and coordinated that they looked like a single organism. They are all searching for the same thing: an explanation. How did it happen? How did the invincible empire, the rising sun that was supposed to illuminate Asia, end up here, in this place, broken and starving, while the enemy drowns in abundance? The answer, when it comes, is not comforting. There is no secret, there is no trick. America simply has more. More factories, more farms, more oil, more steel, more people. More of everything. And it has a system that can turn those resources into power faster than any nation in history. The Japanese strategy was based on the assumption that America would not have the will to fight a long war, that the soft, democratic masses would demand peace, that victory could be achieved through spiritual strength and tactical brilliance. But America did not collapse. It barely noticed. Pearl Harbor, which was supposed to cripple the Pacific Fleet, instead woke a giant that built more ships in 4 years than Japan had built in its entire history. It is not a comforting answer, because it means the war was lost before it began. All the battles, all the sacrifices, all the deaths, they were just the working out of an equation written in 1941. Hayashi understands this now. He sits in the camp and understands it with the clarity of a man who has nothing left to lose. The can sits beside him at night. He has kept it, though he does not know why. Maybe it is a memorial. Maybe it is a lesson. Maybe it is just an object to hold on to in a world that has become unmapped. Other prisoners notice it. One, an older corporal named Watanabe, picks it up one evening and turns it in the light. Americans, he says. And it is not quite contempt, not quite admiration, but something between. They bring their whole country with them. It is true. That is what Hayashi has realized. The Americans do not conquer territory. They export America. They bring their factories and their farms and their music and their mail and their ice cream, and they recreate America wherever they go. The depot is not a military installation. It is a fragment of Ohio or Kansas or California, dropped into a Filipino jungle and powered by an industrial base so vast that it can afford to waste. Japan has nothing like it. Japan has soldiers who will die for the emperor, but it does not have the trucks to move them, or the fuel to run the trucks, or the factories to build more trucks when the first ones break down. Japan has tactical brilliance, but tactics do not matter when the enemy has 10 times your ammunition. Japan has spiritual strength, But spiritual strength does not sink battleships. Watanabe puts the can down. "We were told America was weak," he says quietly. "We were told democracy made them soft." "Democracy gives them this," Hayashi replies, gesturing at the camp, at the depot beyond, at the entire apparatus of American power. "They fight because they choose to. They work because they choose to. And when millions choose the same thing, this is what they build." It is as close as he will come to understanding. Democracy is not weakness. It is the mobilization of choice. And a nation that can mobilize choice can mobilize anything. In March, the camp is evacuated. The Americans are moving north, following the retreating Japanese armies toward the mountains. The prisoners are loaded onto trucks, American trucks, big and powerful, engines roaring, and driven south to a larger POW facility near Manila. Hayashi sits in the truck bed, watching the jungle roll past, and he sees the detritus of war everywhere. Burned-out Japanese tanks, abandoned guns, craters from American bombs, and everywhere, threading through the destruction, American supply trucks rolling forward, tireless as ants, carrying the future. Manila, when they reach it, is devastated. The Japanese defenders fought to the death, block by block, and the Americans reduced the city to rubble rather than leave it in enemy hands. But even here, in the ruins, American engineers are already at work. They are clearing streets. They are rebuilding bridges. They are stringing electrical wire and laying pipe and doing all the unglamorous, essential work of reconstruction. Hayashi watches them through the wire of the POW camp, and he realizes that America is not just winning the war. It is preparing for the peace. Japan is preparing for apocalypse. He has heard rumors, whispers that travel through the prisoner network, of plans to defend the home islands to the last civilian, to arm women and children with bamboo spears, to turn the entire nation into a fortress. It is insane. It is suicidal. It is the logical endpoint of an ideology that values death over surrender. And Hayashi, sitting in a camp where he is fed 3 times a day and given medical care and treated like a human being, cannot find it heroic anymore. It just seems wasteful. He thinks of his family. He has not thought of them in months, has trained himself not to because the longing was unbearable. But now, in the strange liminal space of captivity, they return. His mother, who wrapped rice balls for him before he left. His sister, who wrote letters he never received. His father, who served in Manchuria and came home with stories of glory. Would his father understand this? Would he understand that glory is a lie told to young men to make them willing to die? Hayashi does not know. He will never know. His family is in Hiroshima, and in 4 months, Hiroshima will cease to exist. The war ends in August. The prisoners hear it first from the guards, then from camp loudspeakers, then from Japanese officers who confirm what everyone already knows. The emperor has spoken. The war is over. Japan has surrendered. Some of the prisoners weep. Some sit in silence. Some rage against the shame of it, the dishonor, the betrayal of everything they suffered for. But most, Hayashi among them, feel only relief. It is over. The dying is finished. They are alive, and they will go home, and they will have to build something from the ruins of everything they believed. An American chaplain visits the camp. He speaks through an interpreter, words about peace and reconciliation and the future. The prisoners listen politely, faces blank. But Hayashi hears something beneath the words, something the chaplain probably does not even realize he is saying. He hears the assumption that there will be a future, that Japan will not be destroyed, but rebuilt, that enemies can become something else, given time and effort and the application of those vast American resources. It seems impossible, but then, everything about the last 4 years has seemed impossible. The C-ration can is gone now. Someone stole it, or he lost it, or he threw it away. It does not matter. He does not need it anymore. The lesson it taught is carved into his memory deeper than any scar. Abundance is power. Generosity is power. The ability to feed your soldiers and your prisoners, to build and rebuild, to export your entire civilization into foreign jungles, that is power beyond what any samurai code can comprehend. Japan will learn this. It will take decades, but Japan will learn to build instead of conquer, to trade instead of seize, to turn its discipline and its work ethic toward creation rather than destruction. And it will become wealthy beyond anything the militarists imagined, not through empire, but through choice, through the democratic, capitalist mechanisms it once despised. But that is years away. For now, Hayashi sits in a camp in Manila and watches American planes fly overhead. No longer bombers, but transports, bringing supplies for the occupation. He watches and he understands that he is witnessing the future. Not his future particularly. He is a relic, a veteran of a lost cause. But the future nonetheless. A future built by nations that have learned to turn abundance into strength, that have discovered that the best way to win wars is to be so wealthy, so productive, so generous, that fighting you becomes unthinkable. There is a photograph in the National Archives, dated September 1945. It shows a group of Japanese POWs boarding a ship to go home. They are thin, ragged, but alive. In the foreground, an American sailor hands a cigarette to a Japanese soldier. The soldier takes it, bows slightly, and lights it. The gesture is small, almost trivial, but it represents something larger. The moment when enemies become human again, when ideology dissolves in the face of simple, practical kindness. Hayashi is not in that photograph, but he could be. He is one of thousands who learned the same lesson in dozens of jungles and camps and ruins across the Pacific. The lesson that abundance is a weapon, that generosity is a strategy, that the nation which can afford to feed its enemies has already won. The scouts who reported no resistance were correct in the narrowest tactical sense. There were no fortifications in that clearing, no bunkers, no wire. But they were wrong in every way that mattered. They walked into a forest that was not empty, but full of men, full of supplies, full of the overwhelming material confidence of a nation that had learned to turn its farms and factories into instruments of war. They vanished not because they were killed, though they were, but because they walked into a future they could not survive. And in that future, the C-ration can, that small, ordinary object, became a symbol of everything they did not understand. It represented a system of production and distribution so vast, so efficient, so fundamentally confident that it could afford to package food in heavy tin, print labels in 4 colors, and distribute it to soldiers who would eat it once and throw it away because there would always be more. To men who were starving, this was incomprehensible. To men who were losing, it was terrifying. To men who would survive and rebuild, it became a lesson in what power actually means in the modern world. Not honor, not sacrifice, not the willingness to die, but the capacity to create, to build, to sustain, to endure. the power of abundance, the power of choice, the power of a democracy that, for all its flaws, could mobilize millions of people and turn their collective will into something that changed the world. That is what the Scouts found in the forest. Not resistance, something much worse. They found the future. And the future won.